who is, of course, the head of the economics department. On March 8th, Ron Howland from the history department. On April 5th, John T. Rose, who is professor of chemistry. And on May 3rd, Lenny Sigmund, professor of geosciences. So again, a mixture of people from very different departments of the university. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Mario Gandelsonas. Mario, under the title, the CVs are completely different from scientists. It's fascinating to go on the web and figure it out. It has nothing to do with what we want to do, so it's fascinating. He's professor of architectural design at Princeton. He's also a class of 1913 lecturer in architecture and the acting dean of the School of Architecture. He got degrees from Buenos Aires and from Paris. He's also the founder of Gandelsonas in New York City. He's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Now let me give you a few more things of interest. He joined the faculty in 1991. He's an architect and theorist with specialization includes urbanism and semiotics. He is the director of the Center for Architecture, Urbanism, and Infrastructure. A bunch of different things. He won a international competition for the urban design, and I can't read the Chinese name, but the district in Shanghai, which was completed in 2004. It's a master plan for the South Hamburg Green Belt, etc., etc. And then, of course, he's worked in, I lost the title. Yeah, Des Moines. Yeah, that's French name, by the way. It's Des Moines, not Des Moines. Sorry. It's an old French word. From the Mons. From the Mons, yes. His most recent book is Shanghai Reflection, Architecture, Urbanism, and the Search for an Alternative Modernity. I shan't read the other titles, but this is prolific in writing about architecture and urbanism. Mario.
Thank you very much, Francois, for giving me this chance to present a project that's, as I was telling you, is very involved. Hopefully, I'll definitely love to come back and do something that I don't know if it's going to be more scientific, but it's going to do more scientific next time. Actually, I'm going to contextualize the project by showing a number of projects that I developed in Des Moines, Iowa in the last 25 years. So, since I have lots of slides, I'm start. As a background to what I'm showing, I spent a number of years since the mid-80s looking into different American cities. That's basically my focus of my work. In 1988, I was working at the Skidmore, Owens and Merrill Foundation in Chicago. And the president of Skidmore, who knew my work, suggested that I should try to bring it to what he called reality. He basically asked me, how can we use your theories? I said, well, the theories are not really being developed for use. And he said, well, but I'm, I have the largest architectural office in the world. That was, as I'm saying, in 1988. And I'm interested in what you do, so I would like you to bring this to a city, these ideas to a city. And he said, what kind of city would you like to work with? It's like he was offering me a city. So I said, well, I guess we were having lunch and we had a couple of glasses of wine. So I said, well, first of all, I'd like, give me a list of requirements. So I said, first of all, I need a small city. Coming from New York, it's impossible to get anything done in a very large city. I need a very wealthy city, because the kind of things that I'd like to do require a lot of money. I need a city with a river. I would like to work on a city in the Midwest, because in a way that will become, I I basically said I need the CD in the heartland. So it becomes synonymous with America, and not the CD on the coast. And then he said, at that point he said, well, stop it, I have a CD for you. And what is it? Des Moines Iowa. Why Des Moines Iowa? And he said, well, you just call this person and you'll see why I'm suggesting that that it's the ideal CD for you. So just a couple of for a couple of minutes, I want to describe Des Moines. Well, now in 2015, Des Moines is the third international insurance center in the world. It's a very small city. The city of Des Moines proper. 200,000 people, now 210,000 people. The region, 600,000 people. It's also a high-tech agricultural center. DuPont is there, well, Pioneer, and Monsanto is also there. So the two largest grain companies that work in high-tech and do basically involving GMO are there. Plus banks, etc. So we have a city of 100,000 people with an economy of $8 to $10 billion. This is Des Moines. You can see that actually it is in the center, in the heartland. And what I want to start the story with Des Moines in the 70s. Des Moines, as most American cities, went into a period of major decline in the 70s. Economic decline, basically also with the construction of the Eisenhower highway system, most of the downtowns were somehow raised, and that's where what was called the white flight to the suburbs started, and the major process of suburbanization of America actually accelerated to the point where now in the year 2015 we could even talk about the territorial continental city that goes from the west to the east. It's sprawled throughout America. So in the 70s, in the late 80s, 60,000 people live in West Des Moines, which is the second city that grew out of the white flight from the central city. And this is, you can see here that Tushbin is where Des Moines is, and that red mark is where West Des Moines is. But this is not very precise, but you can see that kind of cloud that describes the city of Des Moines, and another cloud west of it that's even larger. We're talking about 200,000 people in Des Moines and 60,000 people that occupy perhaps twice as much space. And this is the very definition of what sprawl is, with the tragic environmental consequences of this phenomenon. Now, when I first arrived to Des Moines, and this was in 1987, as I'm saying here, at 11 a.m. the city looked empty. There was no one. At 12 p.m. the skywalks, because you'll see the picture, were full of people, and the sidewalks were still empty. At 5 p.m. the streets were full with thousands of cars coming from large parking structures. Everybody was driving back to West Des Moines. At 5:30 the city was empty. And that gives you a perfect sense of what that city was about. It was an extreme case. This is a more recent picture that the cities crisscrossed with these skywalks at the second or third level. And that's basically where people live. And skywalks and the sidewalks are still empty, at least in this area. This is a description of part of the skywalk system, this kind of elevated walkway system. And in green, you see the parking structures, and they're really gigantic. 300 by 300 feet is the standard size. 150 by 300, 150 by 450. And in a way, this plan of the city looks like a checkerboard of parking structures and office buildings. That's basically what downtown is. So from 1987 to 89, in 1987 I was teaching at Yale, and I organized a workshop to study the Moines history, social, economic, and political structure, etc. I became an expert in the Moines. And during the 1988 and 89, I dedicated myself, I started to work on plans of cities in the mid-80s, but those 2 years I dedicated myself to look into the plan of the Moines, and I don't want to get into that more specific, say, part of the issue in my work. And I produced, I mean, it was one of the very early for the use of computers. CAD didn't exist. IBM had their own proprietary system, and they lent me someone who could teach me, and basically ended up doing all the drawings. I mean, I was directing the development of the drawings. I'm just, obviously, I'm not going to show you much, but one of the interesting things that I've shown here, this is actually the plan of the city just showing the 1 mile grid, the continental grid. And the gray is downtown Des Moines. It's a 2 by 4 mile rectangle, and you can see how the grid doesn't penetrate it. Okay? And that's where the city started. Now, you can see here, actually, the major components of the city. There is a river in black inside this picture. The frame is actually the city of Des Moines. The downtown is that white rectangle. There are only left businesses. That's the only thing that existed when I got there. And acres and acres, actually 160 acres of on-ground parking. So the city was basically office buildings and cars parking. What I'm indicating here were 3 major places that I consider very important. Here in the south, the airport, very close to the city. On the west, the Des Moines Art Center. And I'll tell you why that became important. On the right, the famous Iowa State Fair, and which is almost a symbol of Iowa. And in the center, a diagram showing what I understood as the structure of the city. In red, the capital. This is one of the few cities where that is also the capital of the state. On the and then in blue, the downtown CBD, the Central Business District. In green, a corporate campus, and in blue, another corporate campus. And this, for me, was the formula of the law. Actually, part of it is descriptive, part of this is already indicating an intervention. That is, Des Moines grew, like most cities, on an axis perpendicular to the river. That is, there was a river, you needed bridges, you needed to go across. The first grid next to the fourth, the one happened on the west side, the yellow side of the city. The blue is actually symbolically the blue-collar workforce of Des Moines. The yellow is this actual city. That green is City Hall. The green on the other side is where the state capitol is. And the red was the business district when I first got there, which is where all the skywalks are. And that green strip is actually my first proposal for the law, which is a 8-block park as an entrance to the city. What was my goal? As I said, no one lived there. And I said the only way to get this city to become a real city and hopefully a sustainable city that will be ready for the 21st century is to bring people back. And the only way of doing it is to create the conditions for that to happen. And I invented this name Vision Plan at that time, which is now being used in the profession. And in 1990, I was awarded a contract to develop the first Vision Plan. That is 25 years ago. And one of my conditions was that I didn't want to work for the private sector, for those very large corporations. I didn't want to work for the government. I wanted to work for something that I call a partnership that they formed. I mean, there was already, let's say, what was called the Moines Development Corporation that was belonged to the private sector. And the first move, as I said, was for me to produce an entry. I said, this is like a house that is in bad shape. And what you want is a good door to your house, a good frontier to your house. So we call that, I worked obviously with people there, with the building department, planning and zoning, the business community, the local architects and urbanists, the city engineer who hated what I proposed, but because I worked with the rest of the people, we managed to get him to accept perhaps the more drastic idea that I proposed that I'll show you in a few minutes, which was to stop a project for a freeway beltway, elevated beltway, and to transform that into a parkway. And that is directly related to the concept, which was to bring people to the city and not to facilitate the people living in West Des Moines, their commute. So I proposed a slow parkway with red lines. Okay, so we'll get this. So the first move was, when I got there, the entrance of the city was this, you would see the gas station and 8 blocks of car dealership. So I proposed to move the car dealerships and demolish 8 blocks and develop a green western entrance to the city. This is what I found when I first arrived to Des Moines. Okay? And this indicates all the buildings that were demolished. It took 15 years to get this project done.
Mary, there's only one photograph. Can you go back one slide and tell us
Yes.
what we're looking at?
Yes. So what we're looking is, when you're coming from the airport, this is what you face. Okay? You're facing east. Okay? You're coming from the south. You're facing east. That's what the towers are what I indicated with the 9 square grid of the CBD loop. And before that, 10 blocks of 8 of car dealerships, and then turn 2 more blocks. The first building on your right is with a funny tower was Meredith Corporation, the publishing giant. And it was the only corporation that somehow was isolated from all the other ones. So they immediately were very interested with this idea of a park that would provide a link to the CBD, to the actual downtown. Now, as you can imagine, it's not an easy idea to propose in America to buy out 8 blocks of car dealerships and to get them demolished. It took 15 years, but I had the entire business community on my side because I told them a story. I said, you know, people thought Central Park in Manhattan because people thought it was perhaps the most valuable piece of property in the island. And now we have this gigantic park in the core of Manhattan. Now, you know what happened to the value of the real estate of those hundreds of acres that were demolished? they are all projected on the edges. And right now, there are apartments looking to Central Park that are worth $100 million, one apartment. So I said, I don't think it's going to be happening in Des Moines, but it could, it might. So of course, the business community immediately supported the idea. So, okay. So now I need to get this to work. Okay. Frozen. Want it? Well, I got an advertising from Adobe and the kids. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to speed up because. So this shows the first 2-3 blocks that were demolished, and Meredith Corporation, instead of like other companies at that time, were moving to West Des Moines, decided to stay there and to build an extension as a bookend to the park. My proposal was that the park needed 2 buildings as bookends. So they built the first building, and this is, I mean, I intervened in the design of the schematic design of this building. But what's interesting is that I achieved my gate. As you can see, you enter that way into the city. Now, this is an aerial view before the next few blocks were demolished. And a few years later, the Iowa Public Library and the Learning Center became the Eastern bookend. Okay? And this is what we have there today. So, because the idea for me was not just to have green, I mean there is plenty of green in Iowa and in Des Moines, but to create that space with special institutions. Now the most important place, and this is perhaps the main attractor for people now to be there, I mean the people from the entire metropolitan area plus nearby states come to Des Moines just to see this park. This happened 5 years ago, and one of the local 1% people donated 30 sculptures, an amazing collection that is now worth $100 million. And what we did is basically an open-air museum. That is, it's free access from sun sunrise to sunset. Now, this is the entire, it's almost the entire strip. You could see that airplane is the public library, and that light green is the park, the sculpture park. So this is one of the sculptures. Obviously, it's a people place now, concerts, weddings, etc. Everything is happening there. And these are just a few pictures of the place. But major contrast, as you can see, to the first image of a series of car dealerships. This is perhaps this was the most controversial project. That is, I basically realized like now like a dozen projects, and I'm going to end up with this farming corridor. But as I told you, there was this project for an elevated highway, and in a series of town meetings, because that's the way it worked, I presented this idea as an aberration. I told them Boston is demolishing their elevated highway, and I think it would be terrible for you to put this belt in the city that's going to paralyze possible growth. So this is one of the sketches. I mean, that's the way I work with one of the sketches showing them different alternatives for the design of a parkway instead of that beltway. And this is the final project. This was extremely difficult, and that's where the city engineer was totally against this, because obviously a major source of money for American cities is the DOT, Department of Transportation, and it's a constant source of funding that it comes to adding lanes to highways and basically adds to the major problem that we have, enlarging encouraging the fluidity of our streets and freeways and encouraging more and more cars. So they said, well, we're going to lose $250 million or more. And, but that's why you have a business community, and that's why we have a Congress that at that time kind of used to do some things. So, the Iowa, I don't know if it's a House delegate or a senator, managed to pass what's called PORC, money for this parkway inside another bill, and this thing was happening, and it was great. So, I mean, basically, as you can see, urbanism in America implies also knowing how the system works. So, this is a very early photograph of the freeway in winter, so it doesn't really look very glamorous. Now, the next thing, and perhaps the most important one, was the project for creating neighborhoods in the city that was basically just parking lots. And this is one of the drawings, pretty drawings that I presented there. And in black, the future neighborhoods. You could see the 9 squares of the business center. And actually the square neighborhood, this one was a neighborhood, this square was an industrial neighborhood with loft buildings, which now have been converted to loft buildings, like in New York. And on the right side, it's what they call the East Village, and it was a decayed neighborhood, very few people lived, kind of dangerous, and now it's totally transformed. So in the last 15 years, residential developments, conversions, renovations have taken place all over downtown. The east side has been renamed the East Village, which is really a fantastic place with restaurants, cafes, shops, etc. And it was most important is that in the last 10 years, 10,000 people moved back to downtown Des Moines, of which 5,000 moved in the last 5 years. And they kind of project 15,000 more moving to Des Moines in the next 10 years. So this is the renovated buildings, and some of these are new buildings. And the is what's called the East Village with shops and retail, etc. It was really nice. And then in 2007, I've been going to Des Moines almost every year. There was another competition for the second plan, and I won. At that point, I could demonstrate that my ideas worked. And this was the diagram that I presented the first time. This is what the concept that I presented the second time. I said it's time for us to expand the work and cover now the rest of that white rectangle that I told you was representing downtown. And now produce zoning for every single area in that downtown. And so I subdivided the downtown into like a patchwork of potential neighborhoods based on municipal lines, on different types of existing buildings, the few that were left. And this was the plan that we presented. In gray, what exists. In red, what's planned for the next 15 years. Now, this was done in 2008. A lot of what's gray here is now red. Now, another proposal was to, and I said, this is Iowa. How come you don't have a farmer's market? So right now, they actually have the largest farmer's market in America. And the entire, I would say, 600,000 people of the metropolitan area come to Des Moines every Saturday for this. And it's like a big party. So, big difference with the city I first found 25 years ago. And it's really wonderful. I usually buy stuff there and I bring it with me. Now, in the 2008-7 plan, I came up with this idea. I thought, well, you know, there is a railroad that somehow is making it very difficult for the city to develop south. And I thought, well, there is also next to the railroad lots of available land. So why not create a farming corridor? And it's part of the plan. That is, if you check the master plan, this drawing is there. But I presented it to the government, again, to the business community, but it just stayed dormant for all these years. But on the other hand, the farmers market was growing. What I show you is a picture from last year. I'm showing this also because what that plan, the 2008 plan proposes, it's a lot of green space. That is basically almost every single block has green space inside or outside. So the idea is that if this develops, Des Moines won't be your typical cement brick city, or might look in certain areas like that, but it's going to be almost like a garden city. Now, in this year, I went back and I realized, I went back there in very cold weather, winter, and I realized why this idea of the farming corridor never took. Because actually it's impossible. I mean, it's, 6 months every year, it's impossible to farm. So I thought, well, why not think of greenhouses? And why not transform that corridor into a string of greenhouses? So, so this is kind of the fantasy of what this move would be about. Now, this is not a small plan, but as you could see from the beginning, I never went there as the famous architect, Chicago architect of the turn of last century, Daniel Burnham, said, never go with small plans. So, and that's how the demolition of 8 blocks happened. So, so this is basically what I'm proposing. The upper corridor is the one I've been working for the last 25 years. And you will recognize the western entrance and a number of new, it's full of new buildings. And the East Village is now also being built. There are lots of new residential buildings. And there has been also a plan of renovation of the Capitol grounds. So the entire city looks very different. But what I'm proposing here, you see that dark line is the railroad. And that gray line below is the Martin Luther King Parkway. Okay. So the question for me, the Martin Luther King Parkway is not a real barrier because there are light street lights, but the railroad is. So, and all that abandoned, all the land here, it's also a major impediment for that growth. So the idea is to create this corridor that somehow brings back in a way reinforces the identity of Iowa in Des Moines. I mean, there's always been a very strong tension between, like in a number of states, between the capital city or major city and the rest of the state. We have it not in New Jersey because there are no major cities, and New Jersey major cities are outside New Jersey. But in New York, you know very well that New York versus New York State is always been an antagonistic relationship. And the same thing here, because Des Moines is blue, liberal, etc., and the rest of Iowa is red, conservative, and it's kind of shrinking at an incredible rate. That is, people are moving into the Des Moines metropolitan area. So, so this idea is that these greenhouses are not just going to be regular greenhouses. That is, first of all, the idea is to create a partnership with universities and create a project that has a research side. And actually, Iowa State University already adopted this and started conversations here in Princeton. And I already presented this as a possibility of a partnership in terms of some of the issues that are needed to be resolved, because obviously greenhouses bring up a number of issues related to energy, to carbon dioxide, because otherwise the plants will grow, etc. And there is a problem of water infrastructure. One of the greenhouses, or maybe even two, might actually become Iowa State University greenhouses. There are a couple of greenhouses that are actually going to be part of the program of feeding the poor. I mean, there are 30,000 families in Des Moines that don't have enough food, which is incredible. One of the wealthiest cities and states. So so there is a conversation with the county. So one of the questions is, as I'm saying, for instance, the city since I came there has been completely landscaped, and there is a donor, the wealthiest woman in Des Moines, who pays for all the flowers. Now, flowers, trees, etc. The main problem is that they bring everything from other states. So the carbon footprint of that beautiful, flower in Des Moines is gigantic, and we could be planting everything right here next door. The farmers market is selling food from California, for instance, and this will be next door. So, and then there are other issues that are really very difficult, like for instance, obesity. Des Moines is up there in terms of obesity. Another thing that's unique about Des Moines are 3 major hospitals, and 2 of them specialize in heart transplant. Okay. So anyway, I'm working with the Department of Education and the school system. So every school will have a greenhouse, and kids will start planting from kindergarten to understand that food grows from the soil and not from shelves, etc. So anyway, there are a number, as I'm saying, this is definitely an interdisciplinary project because I'm trying to bring together many different issues. Of course, we needed to draw some attractive, I mean, this doesn't look that great because of the lights, but it's a render plan. And this is one of the renderings that I actually just finished a couple of weeks ago, sort of suggesting what this corridor will do for the city. Obviously, major transformation. This was also a very complicated operation because I had to fly a helicopter to get the view. And so this is definitely a view from last month. And well, we obviously inserted this. So this is the idea, okay, that next to downtown we'll have these greenhouses. This is the special light that's necessary to grow most of the vegetable. And as you can see, interspersed between the greenhouses, grows of fruit trees that definitely grow there year-round. So we envision cafes, restaurants, that this is not just going to be a place of production, but also a people's place, and a connection to the skywalk system through the greenhouses to the other side, so this kind of preparing the city for growth in the future. So that's basically the project. So I will definitely welcome questions because obviously at this point of the project, any feedback and input will be definitely welcome. It's not just a fantasy. That is, I vetted the project with the city manager, with the mayor, and with the governor, and they're totally on board. And the most important person here is the Secretary of Obama's Secretary of Agriculture, who is very enthusiastic because he said it's an opportunity also to bring EPA and clean up the railroad yard adjacent land, even if we're not going to be using the soil, but it's definitely going to be part of the project.
Questions?
Yes, well,
What is your plan for the primary energy source for the greenhouses?
Well, actually, we don't have a plan, but we definitely are talking to people. And that is, we need a lot of energy for this. So we don't want actually this to double the problems they already have. So we thought of, well, we thought of solar, and actually there are a number of projects now throughout the city where buildings have been building parking lots with solar roofs. So, and there are now 3 of these, and it works really well. So we were definitely thinking about that issue, and that's where, well, we're also trying to work together with, as I said, Iowa State University, but also here, perhaps the Ethical Center, and see how we can bring in Princeton into the equation.
I mentioned to you this before, and Eric is at my left.
I know, and we had a very brief conversation with them.
When you talk energy in that setting, the fact is you've got a lot of biomass,
Yeah.
including residues of all kinds that are left over from some process or another. You've got a need at a greenhouse not just for energy, but for excess CO2.
Yeah.
So solar won't give you that.
No.
But somehow the conversion of biomass to energy and CO2, both of which you need,
Yeah.
just leaps out as just, it's a perfect place for it. Normally there's no greenhouse for any of these green technology questions that people confront.
Yeah, I remember that you mentioned that. I brought it up in my conversation.
Right, because
Yeah.
you go to what, 500, 600 ppm, 700 ppm in a greenhouse, somebody would know. Kind of number way above what you have in ambient. And you keep it there. You spend a lot of effort in growing flowers in the Netherlands, putting CO2 into
Well, yeah.
the greenhouse.
Well, actually, it's interesting how you're bringing up the Netherlands because I don't know if you've seen that, square kilometers of greenhouses,
Yeah.
and the same thing in the south of Spain.
And they're making CO2. They're making from fossil energy. They don't have a biofuel source. So
Yeah.
Mario, I wonder if you can say something. It's fascinating how you describe this and the sort of number of constituents that you end up working with, and I'm sure those change over the years, right? But just sort of placing the project, the design project, in the midst and as a sort of negotiator, sort of facilitator of some of these different connections from the city to the state to the federal government and various other interest groups, and of course the kind of public, right? However that's defined. Is there anything that can be sort of summarized about how, over the last 25 years, kind of attitudes to questions about the environment and the sort of role of civic infrastructure relative to environmental governance, how those issues have started to come together in different ways?
Well,
I'm sure it's quite
no, I think thanks for that question because it's actually really important. The mayor is a total environmentalist. So he, as a mayor, he's the head of the, what do you call that? The council. Yes, city council. So he was part of the jury for the 2008 master plan. And when I showed him the idea, he immediately bought it. Now, so he's very, very supportive. But what's really interesting is the fact that the governor is Republican. And I mean, one lives on the west side and the other one on the east side. But it's kind of like he's like an old-fashioned Republican. And more important than that is that he comes from a family of farmers. So he was the first one to buy into the idea. Because he said, well, I always resented that, we are seen as, the country, I don't remember the term he used, and the idea of bringing farming back into the super sophisticated city, that thinks of itself like a agrarian, agricultural Silicon Valley, whatever, he left. So what I'm saying, then the Des Moines Register has been the real tool for me to get things up. That is, I couldn't have done anything without the support of it. And from the beginning, they followed every single town meeting, every single project, and by publishing it, they made them real. That people thought, yes, of course, I mean, they would get together on weekends and discuss the project as if the project existed. So it's a very different type of community. It's definitely not East Coast type or West Coast type. It's something else, and it's small. The other important thing is that, of course, I started the project 25 years ago, but I first went there 28 years ago, so I was much younger, and I started to work with people who are also very young. My main sponsor was a guy in his early 40s who had just sold a cable company for $1 billion. And then dedicated himself, totally Republican, dedicated himself to the good of the city. And he built residences for the homeless. And now there is, what's interesting is that there is a new generation of people, younger people. I mean, Des Moines, in a way, reminds me always of the Tocqueville and his description of America, of when he talks about local associations and people participating in government, which I guess could happen at that scale. So it's really quite amazing. Yeah. Yes.
Can you say a little more about the poor? The invisible 40% you said who were hungry and...
No, I said 30,000 people.
30,000.
30,000. 15%.
or something.
Yeah.
I mean, were they effective?
No, 30,000 people in all of Iowa, which is on, there are like 3 million. No, it's not dramatic, but I mean, they're basically scratch their heads, how could this happen?
But you talked about another section, blue collar workers. I mean, to what extent are you solving problems for the elite with the elite versus involving the larger communities that...
Well, it's definitely true that I worked from the beginning with the elite, and I guess it's the only way in which you can do projects at the scale of the city. But I actually, from the beginning, copied, this was early 90s, and I basically copied what Clinton was doing for his campaign with those town meetings, and which at that point I don't think people were doing. And we invited, you see Des Moines is a very wide state, but it was like 80-some% at that point, and now it's like 72 or 73% white. And for that first meeting, I insisted that we need to have representatives of every single neighborhood, and people from the African American neighborhood came to that first meeting, and it was the first time that I was told that by the CEOs of the big companies that they sat together in the same room. And of course, these people brought up a number of issues. They complained about the fact that the sewage wasn't working, the pipes were broken and everything. But it was really for me, it was very, very important to have that, representation. So, and then, I don't know, I'm not, I mean, I'm trying to do my job, so I work with the people who have the power there. And who can get things done. Yeah.
So I think during this project, I envisioned that you also provide job opportunities. And so what's the prospect of that? And so do you think it would attract people to be part of this project to
And my friend, this friend I just mentioned, built 2 homeless residences, they call them, and they look pretty good, actually. They're like SROs in terms of the size of the tiny rooms, apartments, and they can actually live there for 6 weeks. But they also have temporary sheds for them, etc., especially because winter, you know, there are days where if you stay for more than 10 minutes outside, you die. So we're talking 30 below, 40 below wind. So, so they're part of the deal for the homeless is that they have to work at the greenhouse because they also built a small greenhouse next to the residents to teach them the basic skills. So, I mean, not everybody can learn, and it's not that easy. I mean, there, like everywhere else, there are problems with disease, mental health, drugs, etc. But that's the idea, that is to provide employment to the homeless. And, so, hey, you know, these are all like big plans. I don't know how this is going to work. Yes?
It's a total cost of the project.
Cost.
It's a total cost.
Well, that's the major issue. You see, on one hand, the Secretary of Agriculture, who was the governor of Iowa twice, so he's interested because by the end of the year he's going back. So he has a lot of available land for the project. But that's not the problem. The problem is actually how you maintain a project like this in the long term. So it's the question is not initial investment, but I mean also I'm working with business people. So they want to see how, even if this is an ends up, because what they're trying to figure out now is the management, the structure, commercial, let's say non-commercial structures, is how do you deal with the maintenance costs, and to what extent the production can partially pay for that. So, for instance, one of the problems that we've encountered is that if we will be planting flowers, we won't have any profit, okay? Because the profit is gigantic. But if you plant tomatoes, it's not the same. I mean, orchids, it's not like what's going to solve the problem. So what I'm saying is that, well, cost. This could go from, if you, well, we can do something inexpensive or cheap. Because as you can see, the image of the city depends on this project. So these greenhouses are going to be architecturally designed. They're going to be really expensive. And I would say the project, the cost is in the hundreds of millions. Okay.
But so far, I mean, how much have you spent so far to do what you've done?
To do this?
Yeah.
Very little money. Less than, probably less than $50,000. That's
really? Do you mean the other projects? Or?
No, from the beginning, from the standard.
Oh, from the beginning?
Yeah.
All the projects that were done there?
Yeah.
I don't know. What I can tell you is that the projects generate the Vision Plan generated $2 billion in the last 25 years that are now paying, in development, that are now paying taxes to the city. $2 billion. The first Gateway West project generated $1 billion in taxes for the city.
And comparatively, what were they making prior to that?
Well, that's very good. Yeah. So yeah, and that's why I do have the support of the city, because they basically are doing really well. Plus, the city is in the media as an attractive place for millennials, and so yeah. But it's the right question.
Is it because it's a lot of federal money that's coming to you?
No.
Or is it because, in fact,
No, it's all practical. You see, the city doesn't have a cent. And the city actually most of the investments come from the county, and the county is quite wealthy because of casinos. Casino money and lottery money. That's the way the money comes to the project. I mean, this is America. So, and then, and then there were only local developers, and now developers are coming from Minneapolis, from the other cities, because they see that there is a market.
So the $2 billion are paid to whom by the?
Well, no, I'm saying no. $2 billion in development. I mean, investments.
But those are taxable rates.
And those are total taxes.
And that money goes to the county or the city?
That money goes to the city. Yeah. But obviously there was a cost to the project because there were new streets, there were, moving the car dealerships cost a lot of money. And they invested in a new convention center, they're now involved in a new state historical society, which is also a museum, so the public library. So basically all that money was invested in cultural institutions.
Where's sports?
Sports? Well, actually if you saw the diagram, one of these is sports. One of the greenhouses. For sports.
Greenhouse.
A greenhouse.
But where's the big
The
stadium?
structure.
Okay.
The stadium, or you don't see it here.
Yeah, that's where billions of dollars usually goes in the city.
No, not here. They do have a baseball stadium, but not. No. They have a Grand Prix.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.